Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Your story is your mission. Today, I want to talk about a very crucial question that was asked of me by a YouTube subscriber, and that is, can board members of a nonprofit be sued? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. And we're going to explore why and how and what you can do to protect yourself. Now, before we get started, I want to put this disclaimer out there. I am not an attorney. I am a tax exempt specialist and a nonprofit consultant. So, if you do have legal questions regarding this topic, be sure to reach out to an attorney, okay, for a consult. Now, let's talk about the role of a board member. So, board members have a fiduciary duty, okay, and that means confidence or trust. That's involving confidence or trust. They have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of a nonprofit. All right, duties include loyalty, obedience, care. But what happens when something goes wrong? Here are some common scenarios I'm going to lay before you that might cause a board member to face legal action. The first one would be breach of fiduciary duty. As a board member, you're expected to be informed about the decisions you make, and you're expected to act in the best interest of the organization. And if you do not do so, then you could be sued for not fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility. And in just a moment, I'm going to give you an example of what that type of what that could all entail. Breach of fiduciary duty. Negligence. So if a board member neglects certain actions or omissions that may cause harm, then that board member could be held personally liable. This could be failing to properly oversee the organization's activities or even to ensure compliance with laws and rules and regulations. Mismanagement of funds. I think that speaks for itself. Board members who improperly handle the nonprofit's finances, including if you misuse the funds or failure to adhere to financial guidelines, you could face lawsuits. Employment issues. We know what that's like. Legal actions related to wrongful termination or discrimination or harassment that can implicate board members. Personal guarantees. Now, if a board member personally guarantees a loan or other obligation for the nonprofit, then you could be held personally liable if the organization defaults. Again, that you want to touch on that conflict of interest policy that when you're completing that Form 1023, it's very important that the conflict of interest policy is spelled out correctly as the IRS outlines it. And that way you should be able to avoid this personal guarantee issue. Fraud or criminal activities. I think that goes without saying. If a board member engages in or fails to prevent fraudulent or illegal activities, then that can result in a lawsuit against the board members. So that's pretty huge, right? In a moment, I'm going to tell you what you can do as a board member to kind of mitigate these things. Again, not an attorney. This is just a matter of fact. But I do want to say, just going to give you a good example of breach of fiduciary duty. You're just going to touch on that. I think the other ones spoke for themselves. But if a breach of fiduciary duty could be something as simple as an organization they're looking at investing in they're making a large investment, financial investment in a startup. Okay, say that startup is promising to develop new green technology. Now, if the organization fails to conduct due diligence before approving that large investment, then that could be an issue where the board members are sued if the startup turns out to be fraudulent. Because due diligence means before you approve such a large investment for the nonprofit organization, you actually did the research, you fully vetted the startup, and you were sure that they were legit. And you just basically you did everything you could to make sure that you were not going into an investment or bringing the nonprofit into an investment that you didn't fully vet, excuse me. So I hope that makes sense. Definitely do your due diligence. That would avoid any breaches of fiduciary duty. So I also want to touch on negligence. Uh, that kind of speaks for itself, but I want to give you an example. So, say the nonprofit, a board member of a nonprofit, right? A board member of a nonprofit's youth sports league. Say they neglect to put into place proper safety protocols for equipment. Now, as a result, a child is injured due to the equipment being faulty during a game. So the parents of the injured child sue the board member for negligence. They claim that the injury could have been prevented if proper safety measures were in place. So you see how all of this can cause a board member to be sued. And you can see how a board member would be, or board members could be held personally liable. So that's just an example of fiduciary and negligence that could cause lawsuits. I think mismanagement of funds and employment issues, all of those things pretty much make sense. I think you can pretty much understand how that would affect or how you could get sued. I'll just give you a quick example of employment issues just to bring it on home here. So let's just say a board member is involved in the decision to terminate an employee without following the nonprofit's procedures that have been established for disciplinary actions. Okay, again, bylaws are very important. They govern all of these things and tell you how to handle these situations, which is why it should be properly drawn up. Okay. So because the board member did not follow the nonprofit's established procedures, the bylaws for disciplinary actions, then the employee sues the nonprofit and the individual board member for wrongful termination. See that? They sue the nonprofit and the individual board member for wrongful termination because they allege that the termination was unjust because the board member did not follow due process. So I see how that could easily happen. So yes, board members can be sued. Now, what you want to do to mitigate these things, again, not an attorney. This is just a matter of fact. But what you want to do is number one, you want to get liability insurance. I know this is difficult in the beginning when you're new. I get that. But it's important, I think, you get directors and officers liability insurance because it'll provide coverage for board members if they're sued for actions that are taken in their official capacity. So I think it's important to have that type of insurance. And also look at my video on bylaws. You want to have well drafted bylaws and governance policies. The bylaws govern how your nonprofit is to operate, how it's structured, how you handle situations like this, how you avoid situations like this. So just make sure they're clear, they're understandable. The bylaws, because the bylaws will help protect board members by outlining their duties. and the limits of their liability. All right. And the last thing, I think, just adhere to legal and ethical standards. Just ensure your organization is complying with all laws and is operating ethically. This will minimize risk and it demonstrates good faith effort to fulfill fiduciary duties. So I think that's pretty easy for everyone to do. So, like I pointed out to a subscriber, and I was so grateful for her question because it's something that I hadn't really delved into. And I just pointed out to her that yes, an individual board member can be sued, but the one thing that I learned when I was taking my real estate certification, got my license quite some time ago. But the one thing I learned during that class, they said that when someone sues a company or whatever, they're going to go after everyone, whether it's legal, whether they can legally win or not. That individual will most certainly sue everyone in their path. And in this case of a nonprofit, that includes the board members and the organization itself. They're going to sue everyone. It doesn't matter if they can legally do so, they are going to sue everyone, period. That's just the nature of that beast. So be sure to, make sure you've really thought this through. And I also pointed out to the subscriber to, if you have volunteers, or if you're going to volunteer, protect yourself. It's okay to draw up a little contract because I can assure you that the nonprofit is going to have a volunteer sign a contract or some type of document that says if you were to be hurt in this capacity while you're working with the nonprofit, we're not liable. I mean, I would. We did with the nonprofit that I worked with my friends that we started. That's what we did. We had lots of volunteers. Our nonprofit was one that restored abandoned cemeteries. So it required a lot of hard work, physical labor in the woods, digging through all kinds of fallen trees and vines and graves that were sunken in and that you could easily get hurt. So, yes, we did manage the projects when individuals would go out and they would work in the cemetery and restore because it was very important that they understood exactly what a grave that was abandoned looked like. Because, when they're abandoned like that, they're really old. They're predate emancipation in a lot of cases. The cemeteries that we restored, and so hey, a lot of them don't have the regular tombstone that you see today. They may have a rock in the place. They may not have anything but a piece of metal there to indicate that that's a grave, but it's sunken. And guess what? As a nonprofit, we had to protect ourselves and the organization and ourselves and make sure that our volunteers signed was it fully understood what our contracts outlined, and that if they were hurt in the cemetery or what have you, we could not afford that liability. So that's just something that we had them sign off on. So think about that, and for sure, always consult with an attorney when you're doing something like that to make sure everything is okay. But having said all of that, just know that nonprofits, like serving on the board, it's so rewarding, but it is a serious responsibility. So you must understand the risks and take appropriate steps to mitigate those risks. It's crucial for protecting yourself and the organization. So if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification so that you'll get more information whenever I post a video. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for watching.